On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good afternoon, can I help you?
I hope so. My Portuguese friends are coming over to visit me next month, and I need to find a place for them to stay that is quite central, as I live in the city centre myself and want them to be close by. Can you recommend anywhere?
Yes, a few places instantly spring to mind. What about Belvedere Gardens Hotel? Despite what the name might suggest, it's right in the city centre, on Main Street, opposite Grimes Tower.
The Belvedere Gardens Hotel is located opposite Grimes Tower, so you write opposite in the space provided. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good afternoon, can I help you?
I hope so. My Portuguese friends are coming over to visit me next month, and I need to find a place for them to stay that is quite central, as I live in the city centre myself and want them to be close by. Can you recommend anywhere?
Yes, a few places instantly spring to mind. What about Belvedere Gardens Hotel? Despite what the name might suggest, it's right in the city centre, on Main Street, opposite Grimes Tower.
How much is it per night, please?
Quite reasonable given the location. $50, and that is inclusive of a continental breakfast.
Oh, that sounds nice. What about other meals? Do you have to pay extra for them?
Yes, unfortunately lunch and dinner are not included in the price. The hotel does have a very fine restaurant though, and I would thoroughly recommend the buffet dinner there. Customers should be seated by 7:30 in the evening when the buffet starts.
I'll keep it in mind. Is there anywhere else you can think of?
Certainly. The Belfield Grand is always a popular choice. It's located a little further out, though, on the south side of Edgware Common. Perhaps that's too far from the city centre.
Not really. It's only a few stops on the subway. Depends on the price.
Believe it or not, the Belfield is more expensive than Belvedere Gardens, $55.
Oh, that's no good.
Mind you, there is a $10 discount offered to customers who've booked online. There's also the fact that the price is inclusive of all meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner, served in the guest's lounge.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
I like the sound of this hotel more and more. The Belfield, then, so far. Is there anywhere else?
Well, you should also consider the Maple View.
I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
You should be. It's right in the heart of the city, next to the entrance to the pedestrian zone that runs along High Street.
Sounds lovely being so close to the shops. Tell me more.
It gets better. The price per night is only $28 on weekdays, though an additional $12 is charged on weekends and bank holidays.
Sounds like great value for money.
It is. That's why you have to book well in advance of your stay.
How soon should I book then?
Yesterday might not be soon enough.
Yikes! I'd better get cracking. Thank you so much for your help.
You're very welcome.
That's the end of section 1. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now, turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide giving instructions to a group of international students in Canada preparing for a whale watching trip. Before you hear the talk, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully to the first part of the talk and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see so many happy faces on this wild and windy day. Are you all ready to go looking for whales? I'm Tony, and our other guide today is Dale. We'll be using these 2 rubber boats you see here, and our trip today will take 3 hours. In a few minutes, we'll be heading into part of the largest temperate rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. I'll show you our route on the map here. This is where we are now. We'll be leaving the sheltered bay and heading out across the mouth of the bay toward the open water. As you know, last night there were strong winds in the area, so we can't go out into the ocean as we had planned. Near the mouth, the water will be quite rough. That's where we are most likely to spot orcas, or killer whales as they are also called. After crossing the mouth of the bay, we'll enter the calmer, shallower waters. This is where you look for gray whales. Then we will continue up this narrow inlet close to the shore. You will have a great view of giant fir and cedar trees that have never been logged. Here is the place to watch for wildlife. You are likely to see bears along the shore and eagles in the sky overhead. Right at the back of the inlet here are the hot springs where we will be stopping for an hour. You can have a soothing soak in bubbling hot water before the return trip. I'll tell you a little bit about the whales now because with the noise of the wind and the engine, you won't be able to hear much out there. As we head out in the boat, we will probably see dolphins first. They are a gray color and quite small, 1 to 2 meters long. They will swim right beside the boat, racing along and sometimes jumping out of the water just ahead of us. They swim very fast, and they are playful and curious. They're really fun to watch. The next ones we'll see are orcas, or killer whales, which are actually members of the dolphin family. They are 7 to 8 meters long, very fast, and they have sharp teeth. Some stay in these waters all year round. We identify them by the distinctive black and white color. They feed mainly on salmon in these waters, but the orca diet can include seabirds, seals, dolphins, and other mammals. They can be fierce hunters, and this is why they are called killer whales. We should start watching for them as soon as we get out toward open water. We're likely to spot the orcas from a considerable distance. Watch for the black and white marking and mist spouting from the blowholes on top of their heads. Just outside the inlet is where we will probably see gray whales. The grays are migratory. They pass through here twice a year, moving from far in the north where they feed to the warm southern waters where they breed. You are very lucky today because several have been reported in the area. Unlike the orcas, grays are solitary, except when you see a mother with a calf. The gray whales are much longer and heavier than the orcas, 14 meters long, and weighing up to 30 tons. The grey whales are filter feeders, gathering tiny ghost shrimp from the sand at the bottom. We recognize greys from their tail fins because each one is different. Once we find the whales, we'll come up as close as we can safely. We are allowed to approach the whales no closer than 50 meters, but that feels pretty close when you are in the presence of animals this big. You'll see mist coming out of the blowholes when they breathe out, and you'll hear a loud hiss. If we are downwind, we might even be able to smell them, a strong, fishy smell.
Before the talk continues, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now, as the talk continues, answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, for just a few words of caution. It will be quite bouncy out there, especially in the front of the boat. If you want a smoother ride, stay in the middle of the boat, close to the engine. Hold on to the ropes and keep an eye on any big waves. Be alert so you don't get thrown out of the boat. In case of an emergency, you are all wearing survival suits. They'll keep you warm and dry in or out of the water. They are bright orange for visibility. The water temperature is around 8 degrees. Without these suits, you would only last a few minutes in this cold water. With these suits, your survival time is increased dramatically. They will keep you upright in the water even if you can't swim. But we don't expect anybody to end up in the water, so don't worry. Now, are there any questions?
I'm afraid of getting seasick.
Right. I was just coming to that. If you think you might get seasick, take one of these patches and put it on your arm at the wrist, like this. It works on pressure points of the body and will relieve seasickness without the drowsiness you can get from pills. Are there any other questions? All right then, let's start loading up the boats. We leave in 5 minutes.
That is the end of section 2. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 students, Frank and Nicole, discussing their survey results. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
OK, Nicole. Did you interview the required 50 people?
Yes, I have them all here. I had intended to talk to over 50 actually, but I could only talk to 46 in the end, all students from the university. It should be fine for our purposes, and it was interesting actually to hear what they said.
I was hoping for 50 to make a round number. Better for statistical purposes, but 46 should be OK.
I think so. What was interesting was that many of them were not happy with the staff here.
Really? What proportion?
Well, 1/4 of them said the staff were OK, and another 10% said they were good, which together makes about 1/3. So basically the rest of the people I interviewed weren't happy in this respect.
So, what was the main cause of complaint?
Well, it's rather mixed. A lot of the foreign students complained about the homestay accommodation and the attitude of the homestay officers when dealing with these issues. Most of the foreign students said this actually, but the bulk of the mainstream students had concerns with the attitude of the teachers. It seems they feel the teachers don't care enough, and facilities weren't that important, relatively speaking.
I think the teachers here are OK. Don't you think so, Nicole?
Personally, I'd say most of them are fine, but obviously there are a few I'd say need to improve in their commitment to helping students.
Oh, not many though. Only about 10% maybe.
More, I'd say. At least 1/3.
Wow, Nicole, that's a bit harsh. That many? I'd say 90% of the teachers here are fine.
I think I definitely disagree there.
Well, whatever the case, the university seems to have some problems. Who should we inform about these findings?
The course convener. He runs our programme.
Yeah, just a small programme. These problems are serious and university-wide. I think we should talk to the assistant dean at least.
Come on, we're just a couple of students. We can't go that high. It's like some cleaners wanting to talk to the CEO. We've got to follow the chain of command and start at the bottom.
OK, the course convener it is.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
So, Nicole, can you explain the technique you used for interviewing people? Every time I try interviewing, I seem to encounter problems, and yet you managed to interview so many people so quickly. What's the secret?
It's really quite simple. Let me explain it all. The first step, and this is probably the most important point, is to select the position or the location where you're going to do the interviewing. It's got to be a good one. For me, it was the university cafeteria at lunchtime, where people would be relaxed, have time, be sitting down, and be more willing to speak.
Ah, clever.
But that leads to the next point. Everyone's in a hurry these days, so you've got to immediately confirm that they can in fact spare some moments to answer your questions. There's no point starting and then having them rush off in the middle of the interview. It just ruins everything.
Yeah, that's happened to me a few times actually.
And then it's equally important to carefully outline why you want to talk to them in the first place. Some people might think you're a salesman or a busybody or some nutcase from a religious cult. They have to know the purpose and trust you. Now, part of that trust involves guaranteeing that the information will be kept in total confidence. And for that reason, I show how we don't take down names or any personal data. After that you're ready to begin, but sometimes they're not won over or not ready to give you the time, in which case you remind them about how their information can actually improve life for all students, and that they are actually serving the purposes of everyone by cooperating.
Right. Make it seem like a noble cause.
It is in a way, but the last step is not so noble at all. I just offer them a payback, usually a scratchy lottery ticket, if they promise to answer all the questions. Everyone dreams of scratching one of those tickets and winning $1 million, so that makes them do everything you want.
Aha, very clever.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a talk on some well-known personality tests and their uses. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I'm sure at some point in your lives you will have completed a personality test, whether for professional reasons or purely for fun. Such personality assessments are abundant. They pervade our everyday lives, since there is a fundamental human need to understand the motivation behind our own and others' behaviour. Learning how to assess personality permits greater understanding of the motivating factors affecting the way we communicate and cooperate with others, in addition to how we relate to others on a personal level. So now that we've talked about why personality tests are so important, let's take a look at the most well-known tests and see how they compare. Well, first off, we have a favourite of careers officers and potential employers alike, the graphology test. The word graphology is derived from two Greek words meaning writing and word. Essentially, it is an assessment of personality based on handwriting analysis. How an individual dots his I's or crosses his T's, in addition to whether writing is slanted or level, is believed to be indicative of the individual's personality. Whatever your opinion may be of this method of personality assessment, at least it has stood the test of time. The graphology test, as a measure of personality, was first proposed by a certain Juan Huerta de San Juan as far back as 1575, and it has seen fluctuation in its popularity since then. In the 20th century, Alfred Binet was so convinced as to its validity that he termed it the science of the future. And indeed today, it is still a very popular method of personality assessment. Its validity, though, as a measurement of character, is dubious. The British Psychological Society has even gone so far as to rank graphology alongside astrology, giving them both zero validity. A major problem with the test is that an element of subjectivity enters the assessment of certain criteria in the test, such as harmony and style of writing. However, in its favour, the test is relatively quick and easy to administer. Next, let's look at the Rorschach or ink blot test, which is one of the better known tools of psychological assessment. Popularised in party game versions of the test, the Rorschach test has received mixed reactions amongst psychologists. Whilst many dismiss the test as a pseudoscience, it is nevertheless used by prestigious mental health organisations such as the Tavistock Clinic as a valid tool for personality assessment. Admittedly, assessing someone's character based on their reactions to a series of ink blots on pieces of card might seem somewhat ludicrous. Whilst there is a tried and tested methodology behind the construction of the test and assessment of individual responses, the test is subject to cultural bias. The perception of the card's contents is liable to be biased by cultural factors, making the individual responses somewhat meaningless. So, moving on to a test that has similar features to the Rorschach test, let's look at the Lucia colour test. As with the former test, the Lucia colour test assesses an individual's subjective reaction to a series of cards. However, unlike the Rorschach, the Lucia test consists of a series of coloured cards that the individual has to rank in order of preference. How the individual ranks the different colours is believed to be indicative of their personality. While some believe the test to smack of pseudoscience and many question its validity, there is, however, a biological basis to the test, which makes it more of a convincing tool of psychological assessment than many other personality tests. Certainly, its use by psychologists and doctors, as well as authorities such as government agencies and universities to screen their candidates, would seem to be a strong argument for the validity of the test. A major plus to this test is that it is so accurate that it is even sensitive to mood change. Individuals, therefore, taking the same test at different periods of time will see a correlation between results and mood. Finally, I would like to refer to the TAT test, or the Thematic Apperception Test, to give it its full name. On the face of it, it is a very simplistic test. As with the Rorschach and Lucia tests, the individual is dealt a series of cards. However, on these cards are depicted a series of ambiguous scenes involving groups of people. The individual is required to make up a story about each, and the individual is then assessed based on the content of each story. Whilst the test is quick and simple to administer, critics of the test argue that there is a lack of standardisation of the cards and scoring systems, making comparisons between individuals problematic. This, therefore, undermines the validity of the test. Nevertheless, the TAT test is still used as a tool in fields as diverse as psychological research into occupation preference and partner selection and forensic examinations to evaluate crime suspects. It is therefore a matter of individual preference as to which test is used when employed for professional reasons. All these tests, though, have their benefits and their drawbacks. No one definitive test exists that provides 100% accuracy in assessing personality.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answer.